I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is an awesome 15-year-old boy from Tennessee. His name is Sebastian Rogers. He's a child with autism, and he is missing. Now, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered in this case. Here's more of Sebastian's story.
Inside this beautiful neighborhood in Hendersonville, Tennessee, there is an unsolved mystery. It was a Sunday night going into a Monday morning, and 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers was supposed to be inside his home sleeping. His mother, Katie Proudfoot, says he went to bed at 9, but was making some noise around 10, including a thud sound. Katie told him to go to sleep. She went to bed at midnight. Then at 6 a.m., Katie woke up. She went to his room to get him ready for school, but Sebastian was gone. She searched the house, and he was nowhere to be found. Sebastian's stepdad, Chris Proudfoot, was not home, and Sebastian's father, Seth Rogers, was at work about 45 minutes away. Police responded and began trying to figure out what happened. That was February 26, 2024. And as the days, weeks, and months have passed, still no sign of Sebastian, no sign of foul play, and no answers about what happened. Did someone harm Sebastian, or did he just walk away? We're searching for answers as we investigate the mysterious disappearance of Sebastian Rogers.
From the beginning, this case has not made a lot of sense because of the lack of evidence, the lack of leads. I want you to take a look, though, at the original Amber Alert in this case, because I think it's significant. The Amber Alert went out, issued on behalf of the Sumner County Sheriff's Office for Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers. Sebastian is a 15-year-old white male, 5'5" tall, 120 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Sebastian was last seen on February 26th, 2024, in the area of Stafford Court in Hendersonville, Tennessee. February 26th. That's the last time he has been seen. So what's going on right now? You know, we profile missing children all the time, every night. So my question right now is anyone still searching for Sebastian? Let me bring in my special guest, someone I know is still searching. Sebastian's father, Seth Rogers, is with us, and also joining us, the Rogers family spokesperson, Tony Mathis. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and the opportunity to speak about Sebastian. Seth, let me begin with you. Is anyone still searching for your missing son?
I am. I have a private investigator that's still working on it. She conducts her searches in private. She has her own volunteer base. We're not going to stop until we find it.
Let me ask you this, Seth. Outside of what you are doing, is this search still active? Let's talk about law enforcement.
From my understanding, law enforcement is still searching. They're doing it privately as well. They're checking in on tips when they come in. If we get tips, we pass them on to them. Same time we get them.
And how is that part going with tips? Are people still providing information when they come across things? And what are your thoughts about?
We still get information. I mean, we still get emails every day. We have a tip site that is up. I put that up. It's a valid tip site for anybody who wants to email or call, wants to be anonymous or whatnot.
Tony, I wanted to bring you in the conversation. This is a difficult situation. And I understand the onslaught of public attention that this has gotten. And sometimes that's a big positive in keeping Sebastian's face in the public and getting people to know who he is and think about him. And if they see something, hopefully say something. But obviously there can be downsides as well. How is all of this publicity, from your perspective, impacting the search for Sebastian?
Well, we don't really believe that any of the media attention, social media attention, any of that is really going to impact what law enforcement's doing one way or another. It does impact the father, that I represent, Seth. We thank all the creators out there that continue to keep Sebastian's name out and do it in a positive way. Our message to most of the media attention, more social media than mainstream, is that, we ask that you cover the case in a positive way. If you choose not to do that and back away, that's okay too. But any positive support that we can get for Seth while he's looking for his son is a big deal for us.
And Seth, I know that during the course of all of this, there have been some potential leads that became very public, including a photograph of someone who seemed to resemble Sebastian at a rest stop in, I believe, North Carolina. How are you holding up through all of this, and where's your level of optimism right now?
I have faith. I have hope. Sebastian's alive. We just got to find him. There is nothing else. Just finding Sebastian.
Tony, I wanted to get you in on this as well, in terms of as a family spokesperson, do you feel that there is still the same level of, I guess, commitment from everyone, the community, law enforcement, media, to make sure that anything and everything is done to find this missing child?
Well, Vinnie, I think that it's our job to keep his name out there in the community. All of our job on Seth's team, and of course I represent just Seth. It's all of our jobs on his team to keep the community engaged. We continue to have events, have vigils, have gatherings, keep his name out there. The media, mainstream media, such as yourself and many others, have been very good and very helpful. It's very easy to get interviews if Seth feels up to doing an interview. I think the X factor for us is law enforcement. I think that the communication, it's been a bit lacking, at least as far as Seth and I are concerned. We don't really know what it is they're doing. We have faith. We heavily back the blue. Of course, Seth is in law enforcement. I live in Oklahoma. We strongly back the blue in my community. But, the question that I always ask that we still haven't got an answer to is, just simply tell Seth, are you any closer today to figuring out what happened to Sebastian than you were on February 26th? And quite frankly, we feel like that's a very fair and logical question. We have not got an answer to that.
That has to be absolutely excruciating. By the way, folks, as you watch, you'll see on the bottom of your screen numbers and places you can contact if you have any information. Seth, how are you holding up? I'm always concerned about you going through this. I've spoken with other parents through the years. I got a strong sense from them what it can be like. How are you holding up?
It's more like 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. It doesn't really seem like it's been 5 months. It's just you lose track of time. I mean, all you're doing is thinking about the next place to go look, what the next thing needs to be done, and just trying to stay positive, trying to stay focused on finding my son and what's the next step to do.
What's been the biggest frustration for you so far in the search?
Not getting much in terms of information-wise. The last thing that I was really informed of by the sheriff's office is they don't have anything stating that he left the house. And that's pretty much, you know, that's it. But obviously he's not there, or else we wouldn't be looking for him. You know, there's no sightings. There's nothing. Just went poof. Things just don't make sense. I mean, we're talking about, first of all, we're talking about a male child that left his house with nothing. A teenager that left the house with nothing. No phone, no switch, possibly no shoes, no backpack. I mean, completely unprepared. That's
No money.
It's not how he leaves the house to go somewhere with me. I don't expect him to leave anywhere without his phone and way of communication in case something happens. It's just too much doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. Seth Rogers, Tony Mathis, stand by, stay with us. When we come back, we have another question to ask tonight. Was Sebastian's mom the last person to see him?
We are just trying to do whatever we can to advance the investigation. It has not gone to a place where anybody has forgotten about him or is not pursuing this. The parents have been cooperative throughout at the beginning of the investigation. They have pretty much done whatever law enforcement has asked of them.
That's TBI, talking about the case of missing 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers. So parents are cooperating. Now, his situation, his parents aren't together anymore, so his mom, he has a stepfather, and he has a dad, and they were all in the same area when all of this was happening, the same general area. But I want to play you something, which was an interview that was done with Sebastian's mother, Katie Proudfoot. Her and her husband sat down with the YouTube channel Chronicles of Olivia, and she explained the last time that she saw Sebastian.
He said, "All right, good night, Mama. Good night, puppies. Love you." And went to bed. He was doing something in his room because about an hour later I heard some noise, and I was like, "I don't care what you're doing in there, but go to sleep." And about midnight, I got up and I went to bed. And 6 o'clock, I went to wake him up for school Monday morning, and that's when he wasn't here.
So Sebastian went to bed. They're in the same house, different parts of the house. She heard a thud noise, but didn't go to see him. But what was going on with that alleged thud noise, and who was with him? Was there anyone with him at that moment? Or, bringing me to my next question, was Sebastian's mother the last person to see him? Was she the last one? Was there someone else that came to the house that night? Or is there some other story? Our guests are still with us. Seth Rogers, Sebastian's father, and Tony Mathis, the family spokesperson. Seth, from your perspective, I know you've listened to every potential piece of information that's been available in this case, that's been made available. To me, that thud noise, I've always thought about that, what that could have been if it happened, right? What are your thoughts about Sebastian's mom? Do you believe she's the last person to see Sebastian before he disappeared?
I'd say yes. I mean, he was in her house. She's the one that put him to bed. She'd be the last person to have seen him.
What do you think about that thud noise that she described, the rustling that was going on? I thought about it. I've looked at the house. His room is on the first floor, right? So his window is accessible from the outside?
It would be, I believe, but I know law enforcement went around the house and stated that none of the windows or screens had been tampered with. So as for the thud, I mean, I don't know what she would classify as a thud. If I heard something in his room I know I'd go check on him, just because I want to make sure he's okay. I mean, he's got a medical condition that would definitely mean I need to go check on him just to make sure he's okay.
And have you spoken with his mom about that night at all? Have you had any sort of conversation, either just the two of you or with other people there?
Have not had a conversation with her just alone, and probably won't.
Why is that?
Because every time I want to speak to her, I'm going to have to speak to Chris. Chris wasn't there. I don't know why he needs to be involved in a conversation about what happened that night. And if he was on a phone call, then maybe he can tell us what the thud was.
How about the rest of the day leading up to the point that Sebastian got home? Who was the last person other than his mom to see him? And have you spoken with that person?
No, I guess the last person to see him besides his mom would be, the waitress at at Texas Roadhouse.
And Tony, as we try to track and figure out who interacted with Sebastian, where he could have gone, how this could have happened, from your perspective, what are the lingering questions that you see in this case as well?
Well, if you're talking about that situation specifically, Vinny, I mean, clearly she was the last person that was seen with him. There has been no evidence that he ever left the house on his own. So in my mind, what would be the opposite of him leaving the house on his own? It would be leaving the house with somebody. Well, the only somebody, admittingly, by Katie, that was in that house was her. So clearly we have some questions there. But my bigger question as Seth's spokesperson, and where I would ask Court TV to give us some assistance is, we have video evidence that shows that Seth was at work. We've had all of his electronic devices that have been seized and dumped. We'd like to know why Seth still hasn't been cleared, or what they might need from Seth and or myself to get him cleared.
So they have not cleared Seth. I didn't realize that. I just didn't realize that was the situation. So
not at all.
So my guess is if they haven't cleared him, that may explain some of the lack of communication that is going back and forth in this case.
Good possibility. But what more do you want
Correct.
from me? I was at work. I was video camera from 6 p.m. till after 7 a.m. the next morning. My son should be with me right now. He should be in this house, and I should not be looking for him. Tell me where I don't gain anything from this. This is not funny. You know, the fact is I'm looking for my son. He's not here. Y'all took my electronics. What more do you want? I mean, do they need my bank records? I mean, you can have them. I mean, I don't understand what I have to do to get cleared.
We're willing to do anything to get it cleared, Vinnie.
Go ahead, Tony.
There are resources.
Yeah, we're willing to do anything to work with them to get him cleared, because it does allow us to bring in more resources once he's clear. And you know, if the video evidence, the phone data, and whatever else they may need isn't enough, then we'd simply like us to tell them, you know, why is it that he hasn't been cleared? He did a polygraph test with a well-known FBI polygrapher that Nancy Grace set up, and he passed that with flying colors. So, you know,
we're out of time, unfortunately. Tony, I'm sorry I have to cut you off there. We're out of time, but thank you both for joining us. We'll still look for those answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. Our investigation into the disappearance of 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers from his home in Tennessee continues. The circumstances surrounding this disappearance, though, really raise a lot of questions that need to be answered. Here's more of his story.
15-year-old Sebastian Rogers seemingly disappeared without a trace from his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where he was living with his mom and stepdad. His mom said he went to bed, and in the morning, he was nowhere to be found. Investigators reportedly have no suspects, no leads, and no evidence of what happened to Sebastian. How is that possible? And where is Sebastian?
This is a case that's been very short on evidence, but an audio recording has been circulating online that sounds like it could be a radio transmission from a canine handler during the search for Sebastian. Now, the speaker on this audio references several places near Sebastian's home, like the construction site, the cemetery, and the retention pond. The link to this audio file was uploaded to Twitter by SF Investigates, but it's unclear where the recording came from originally.
Nice big track back up, going into the construction site over here, back towards the beach. The one behind you. It's awful muddy. Do you see any footprints, anything? You shouldn't have any shoes on. Thing is, this is all dry, hard packed. Outside report. LT, we're now headed back south towards the cemetery on the far end of the construction site. Yeah, boy, I can see. I do have some footprints over here. Right there where you're standing? Yeah, leading right over here to the retaining pond. No shoes, just footprints? The shoes, but Max went straight into the pond. He literally dove into it.
So if you've got the canines taking the handler somewhere, what exactly does that mean? It brings me to our next question in this investigation, which is, did Sebastian walk away? Did he walk away? Just leave home for whatever reason? To try to answer this question, let's bring in our experts, relationship trauma expert, psychotherapist, and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey is with me. Also joining me, former homicide detective and host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us as well. Great to see you both. Chris, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts about this recording and the thoughts of the canines and their handlers following some scent somewhere?
Well, first of all, Vinnie, the recording in of itself, and I was a dog handler from 1986 to 1989. And when a dog is on a track like that, you know, is she picking up the scent of the the boy headed towards that pond. Is that a possibility? Absolutely. It could be a possibility. So the investigation then would have to shift into, the water resources in relationship to that pond to make sure they've checked that box.
Let me ask you, Dr. Jenny Lacey, this is a 15-year-old child with autism. We're asking the question, did Sebastian walk away? How do you analyze that issue, knowing a little bit about Sebastian, not a whole lot, but we know he's a child with autism. He's able to do things. He goes to school. He's still a teenager, and he has those teenage issues as well. A little bit of friction at home with mom. What are your thoughts about the prospects and trying to figure out whether or not this child with autism at age 15 would simply walk away from home?
Well, my thoughts, Vinnie, would be we would want to collect as much past history as possible. So what was his normal habits? What were any circumstances where he would do things that would be out of his normal pattern? Who were the people who had the most access to him, and what would be some of their impressions, observations, if he tend to have normal habits, if he tend to have repetitive habits. So those would be some of the collection points that we would want to understand, the observations, what was his habits, what were the things that people reported that was any type of strange behavior, because we know that past behavior can predict future behavior. So we want to look at some of those kind of pieces to see if the possibility for him to just walk out of his home and to some of these areas would be likely based off of his past indications of behavior or past observations from those that had access to him.
All right, Chris, from your perspective, trying to put together pieces and trying to figure out, did he or did he not just simply walk away from his home? What are some of the things that you're looking for, and what are some of the things that have been revealed that would be significant in trying to answer that question?
Well, the first thing, Vinnie, is whenever a child goes missing, you have about 3 hours from a law enforcement perspective to react. And that means, shut the scene down, shut the house down, because, statistically across this country, there's what they call the victim risk continuum. And the lower the risk, the higher the probability that there was, some type of cross germination to either a suspect and or, a risk activity that put the child in jeopardy. Let's use Elizabeth Smart for an example. She's sleeping in her room. All of a sudden, she disappears out of her house. But her sister remembered that it could have been the handyman. This was months later. So that showed that the investigation stayed at the home. In this particular case, you have mom who says, I saw him go to bed. I heard a thump. I went to bed. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He's gone. Well, children just don't vanish. So what are the probabilities, based on what the doc just said, that could be reality? So as an investigation, you want to start in the house. You want to start with everybody in the house, everybody related to the house, and then search the neighborhood. And you'll be surprised with today's technology how the circle gets smaller, smaller, and smaller. So those are a couple of things that I think this investigation started, and it looks like they did a pretty good job based on the filming that I've seen.
Now, Sebastian's dad joined the Pascal Show on YouTube and discussed what law enforcement's dog handlers told him about the search for Sebastian.
One dog followed a scent out into a construction site, and then it disappeared. Could you maybe expand on that or explain a little bit more about that?
One of the dog handlers told me first day,
Wow,
Monday, that the dog popped to a trail and they followed it and went all the way around, and it ended in a construction site, but it ended. It's like there was nothing there.
right. And that's a little odd,
Which
right?
leads me to believe that, well, if it ends, Normally the scent ends when you stop traveling on foot. From my understanding, that would mean that he got into a car.
Okay, let's follow up on that, Dr. Jenny Lacey. If he ends up in a car, to me that means he would have been lured out of that house in the middle of the night. What are your thoughts about the prospects of that? Someone like Sebastian, right? He has some special needs. He's a child with autism. Being lured by someone, perhaps someone from online, and bypassing, not telling his mother, not telling his father, and being able to walk out of that house. What do you think it would take to lure Sebastian out of that home?
Well, we would want to consider his normal patterns of behavior, including who he had normal conversations with. Was he playing online, on games, and speaking with people he became familiar with? So we would want to look at the familiar patterns for him. And if potentially, as we know, a lot of teenagers do play games online and have online friends. So we would want to investigate and look at who was he regularly talking to or who he encountered, because based off of that information, if he potentially was lured and he got into a vehicle, we would probably want to make some assumptions that there probably was some familiarity, and unless there's some evidence of struggle, which it doesn't sound like there is. So I would be looking at his attachments or his familiar patterns when it comes to people he was commonly communicating with, playing games with, or just potentially who he would consider friends. And a lot of teens consider people they meet online as friends. So that would be a path that we would want to follow.
I want to take a listen to what his dad told me on a previous program about Sebastian just walking out of the house.
It doesn't seem like my son at all. He would never leave my house in the middle of the night barefoot. And if he did, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. We've left in the middle of the night. There's been times that we've gone fishing in the middle of the night. We plan that sort of stuff. But him walking out the door in the middle of the night, no. It's not something he would do. It's something he's never done on me.
Chris, for him to walk out in the middle of the night, I think it would take him to be lured by someone. And if that's the case, there would seemingly be some digital trail and perhaps a physical trail of that.
Yeah, absolutely, Vinny, and you're 1,000% correct. And that digital footprint by this point, we're almost 6 months into this, and let's also take into consideration we have a child on the spectrum scale. He's on medication. So, if he's lured out of that house, then the suspect is taking a risk. Number one, within a very short period of time, if the victim starts to have withdrawals or anything on that medication, that's a huge problem to manage if you've just kidnapped this child. The second piece of this, to that digital footprint question, is if the authorities have looked at that digital footprint and said, okay, it just doesn't exist, then you have to go back to the house and you have to start looking at all of what we call the victimology of each and every individual that is in that home or had access to that home, and then start dissecting this case from there.
All right, our guests are staying with us. When we come back, have to ask another question, and this is a tough one. Will Sebastian ever be found?
There is no evidence to support foul play is involved in the disappearance of Sebastian.
But at this point, you don't rule it out?
We're not ruling anything out.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV. Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Weeknights, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
not part of the investigation, and they don't have to let me know anything, which they don't let me know anything. I'm in law enforcement myself, so I've got to trust the procedure. I got to trust that if everything is followed by the procedure and everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, that there will be a positive outcome and my son will be found. I don't understand. They haven't came up with anything. Why they're not asking for higher powers to help.
A level of frustration. I think you heard it there from Sebastian's father, Seth Rogers. Communication with law enforcement, but law enforcement in this case, where are they in the investigation? What evidence is there? I want to go back and take a listen to one of the original press conferences in this case right after Sebastian went missing. And at these press conferences, a lot of times you'll hear different things. Sometimes they'll show you a photo of a car that they're looking for or something else. Listen closely to what they did say.
There is no evidence to support foul play is involved in the disappearance of Sebastian.
But at this point, you don't rule it out?
We're not ruling anything out.
At this point, we don't have any evidence. There is not any kind of an indication that there is a criminal element involved. But we are keeping options open. We don't know what has happened. We don't know where Sebastian is right now, so we are pursuing any and all avenues.
No evidence of foul play. Like, you could end the sentence, I think, a little quicker. Like, no evidence is what they're saying. A 15-year-old boy disappears. No evidence. Brings me to my final question. This is a tough one. Will Sebastian ever be found? If you've got no evidence, how do you find him? Let me bring back in my guests. Still with us, Dr. Janie Lacey and Chris McDonough. Dr. Janie Lacey, I want to start with you first, which is the toll that this takes on a family, on a father, when you're not getting communication from the people who are in charge of finding your missing son, and you hear the words, no evidence. How much more difficult does that make all of this?
Well, there's no doubt that Dad has lots of frustration. There's probably a lot of unanswered questions, and just the unknown factor can continue to stress out someone's body, his body, where he's probably up at night, ruminating, constantly thinking back his last conversations and just replaying everything, the anxiety, right, the fear. But what I also heard in his interview with you is his hope and him staying focused and him not giving up and him continuing to use his own resources and hiring a private investigator. Those types of things, as long as he's staying focused on his hope and knowing that his son is out there, that alone is going to keep his drive there. But we know that the support that he needs, the resources that he needs, and to continue to keep this story and his son front and center can provide some hope and some relief as far as that he's not alone in this this journey to find his precious Sebastian.
Chris McDonough, you have so much experience in this area. Give us the honest answer right now on where you are based upon what we know and what we've heard in this case. Will Sebastian ever be found?
You know, Vinnie, I have hope like you and everyone else that's a possibility. Statistically, 6 months into this, unless he did walk out that door on his own accord, that possibility, gets lower and lower. One of the things I would love to see the investigation do is take that shift in relationship to father, the biological father, Seth. If he's at work, they have him on video, if his truck's on video, et cetera, and they can verify and know that's a possibility, then tell the public. Okay? You have to tell the public what your steps are so that if you think of a gigantic puzzle let's say, the Statue of Liberty, and you're missing 5 or 6 pieces, the public will fill in that extra piece, okay? Because right now, the public doesn't know. When they hear we have no evidence, the public wants to help. And that's who the investigation needs to focus on. Because again, if we go to just the fact this child needs medication, well, who's managing that medication on board? There's one other huge piece of evidence potentially why they may be keeping him in the circle. In the back neighborhood behind the house, there is, my understanding, a video of potentially a vehicle back there. And there may be, some connection to the house, to that vehicle. I don't know whose vehicle that is, but maybe the authorities are thinking, hey, did the father hire somebody, et cetera, to get the kid out of here because it's a custody problem? That's pure speculation at this point on my behalf. However, that would keep him in the circle and keep that minimal flow of information away from him if that was a possibility.
Now, at one point in the search for Sebastian, a volunteer group recovered glasses many believed to be his. That wasn't until law enforcement released a statement refuting that hopeful notion. And let me read it for you. Important announcement. Attention, everyone. We want to clarify that the eyeglasses recently found are not related to Sebastian Rogers. The search operation plan for today has been in the works for several days. We appreciate your cooperation and understanding, because that was a big part of this case and a big part of when you see Sebastian, you see the glasses, and glasses were found. And it raised a lot of hopes at the time, but law enforcement did in fact go public with it. Dr. Janie Lacey, if Sebastian is out there somewhere, we only have about 30 seconds here, but what do you think is going through his mind if he's being held somewhere?
Especially if he's not having his resources as medication, there's probably confusion, right? There's probably a deterioration in his physical symptoms because of the stress level. So there's probably just a lot of confusion if he is out there and he's being held and not knowing what's going on and not familiar with his surroundings or the people who is there. He'd be scared, he'll be fearful. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Janie Lacey and Chris McDonough, I want to thank you both for joining the investigation tonight. Your insight is really important, and your time is valuable, so we appreciate it. Okay, folks, no leads, no evidence, no answers. That is just not acceptable. 15-year-old boys don't just disappear. They don't just vanish. Something happened. Either something happened to him in the house, before he got to the house, or someone lured him out of that house. Someone knows something. And his family, and of course Sebastian, deserve an answer and deserve justice. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep looking for answers as the investigation continues.